Progressive presents Forced Metaphors about bundling your home and auto.
In sports, 3 goals is a hat trick. And when you bundle your home and auto with Progressive, you get a hat trick of great savings and round-the-clock protection. So you might be thinking, wait, that's 2 things. A hat trick is 3. But in this metaphor, great savings counts as 2 goals, and so does round-the-clock protection. So it's like 4 goals, and that's more than 3. It's basic math.
Forced Metaphors. Presented by Progressive. Bundle and protect today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Discount not available in all states or situations.
Welcome to Women Winning Divorce with your host, Heather Quick. Heather brings over 20 years of law experience that advocates and empowers women to achieve happier and healthier lives. Each week, we provide knowledge and guidance on different aspects of family law to help lead women through the difficult and emotional legal challenges that they are facing. Listen in as she discusses issues including divorce, custody, alimony, paternity, narcissism, mediation, and other family law issues to provide insight on the journey of women winning divorce. Welcome to the show. I'm Julie Morgan, and I'm joined by your host, Heather Quick. Hi, Heather. Good to see you again.
Great to see you as well, Julie.
I was listening to our shows, and I'm thinking, I have even more questions than I had before. And then those questions actually lead to more questions that would be a totally different topic.
Yeah, it does, because it builds on one another, and then you start thinking about things that really you wouldn't have ever probably thought about before, or you think about it in a different way. So then you're like, well, then how does this affect something else? So I think that's very natural.
Let's talk about today's topic and I remember this, it's not child custody, it's time sharing.
That is correct. You're so good.
Learned
paying attention. You're paying attention, Julie.
So when you think about the state of Florida, how does the state of Florida view time sharing? How does it define it?
The state of Florida looks at time sharing as essentially, it is what most people, if you're not using legal language, think of as custody. And but it also makes sense with the word time sharing. How much time and you're sharing your children together with the time. And they really look at it to begin with as the children should spend as much time with each parent as possible.
Half and half, right? You get equal time.
Well, I think there are a lot of options in regard to that. Practically speaking, it's not quite that easy. It's easy to say, oh, we're going to have equal time, and that makes everybody happy. And there are so many other things that then result from that. And the biggest thing I will tell you is that communication is essential. When you are, especially, it really doesn't matter the age, because there's different challenges at every age of the children, but communication is key. You really have to get along, and you really have to be flexible with one another. Well, as you can imagine, individuals who are divorcing may not have the best communication with one another. So it presents its challenges. But when I was younger, and with everybody, like in the state of Florida, if you look, I won't give away my age, but let's say you look 20, 30 years ago, it was different. And our households and the makeup of families were different. More so than now, not 100%, but a lot. This is in this generation, more women are not only working, but, very successful. And it's more of a partnership than with the children than it used to be, than traditional, like my grandparents, let's say. And of course, that is not for everybody, but I think everyone can think in terms of, hey, there was a majority of a standard situation, 30, 40 years ago, that the mom was at home, the dad worked. And in those cases, that's how it began with the time sharing this every other weekend, because the dad had to work. So the mom needed to be there during the week.
Okay. Now, so earlier I said equal time. So I know Florida is an equal rights state. So equal rights does not necessarily equal time.
That is correct. And at the end of the day, it's what's in the best interest of the children. And many men's rights groups will say, oh, no, we deserve 50-50 all the time. Well, if that's not in the best interest of the children, no, you don't. And you know what? if it's not in the best interest of the children for the mother to have them the majority of the time, no, that's not what's going to happen. It is going to happen what's best for the children, for their schedule, for their age, their developmental stage. There's so many things that go into that. To have a blanket, this is the way it's going to be, doesn't consider all the nuances of children and the way the family operated prior to the divorce.
Tell me this, can one parent get sole custody of the children?
That's an extreme type of case. And that's going to be a case where you've got somebody, essentially in jail, an addict who's gone. I mean, it is extreme but it's happened. I have absolutely been involved in cases where that was the way it needed to be. And generally, in sole custody is different. You haven't lost your parental rights. You could, that's a different type of law that we don't handle. But there's typically, if you get better, if you get help, then there can be relief for you to maybe see your children again. But yes, that does happen. And those are the extreme cases that there is serious substance abuse, mental health issues, and or criminal activity, things like that.
I'm glad you actually just clarified that, because when I think of sole custody, I do think of one parent has lost their rights and that's it.
And right, correct. That's a different topic of law. And that involves, a lot more of the state agencies. It does happen. And that's really probably but you would mostly see, if you see a sole custody issue, it's going to be the things that I spoke about, drugs, substance abuse, jail, mental health, severe things. And then that would be when that would be appropriate to even seek that.
Okay, so those are extreme cases, you would say.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Can the children pick who they want to live with?
No.
Oh.
And on one hand, many people say, well, I heard when they're 13. People hear a lot of things that have nothing to do with what's in the law, I can tell you right now. But we've all watched a lot of TV, we've seen movies, and somebody tells you this, so you're like, well, that must be true. Or if you're like my children, and if it's on TikTok, it must be true, right? And so if you saw it there, I'm going to tell you that is not true. Now, there are cases where the children have input, but it's such a dangerous thing, because look at it. If you can think about it this way, one, we want the children to love both parents, and children should not have to choose. And there are a lot of things maybe about their parents that they really shouldn't know. They'll find out one day, but when we're, looking at these court proceedings, maybe they don't need to know that. And it puts a child in such a difficult position, because they don't want to choose. And they don't want to, even if they're much more comfortable and happy with their mom, they don't want to hurt their dad's feelings. Or if they want to be with their dad more, they're like, oh, well, my mom's lonely, I don't want to hurt her feelings. So the courts take all that into effect. And also, there's that in and of itself. And who wants to give children that much power, particularly teenagers who are, one, I think, naturally manipulative. I mean that in the best way. If they're healthy, normal teenagers, they're manipulative. They are very egocentric. And you don't want to give them that power, because yes, they can be bought, and yes, they can be swayed. And but it's important, the older they get, for them to have input, if that makes sense, for a 16-year-old. But just because you turn 13, and I will tell you, this is an example of a case where they're with the mother the majority of the time during the proceedings, and the mom says, hey, I want to testify. The child wants to testify and tell the judge how much they dislike their father or how much they don't want to be there. My concern there is that if they've been with you all the time, where are they getting that impression, and how is that going to reflect on you? And that's a big concern. So we really got to dive into it. And that's when you need the mental health professionals, which, we've talked about before.
So many more questions. Okay, well, let's first of all start here. This sounds like a very just emotional procedure to go through.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When you, even if you don't disagree, even if um, it's your typical situation and it's just emotional because it's your life, it's your children. Yes, it is. And then it just goes from there when there's so much animosity. There's different values, different thoughts on how to parent that existed when you were together. Somebody wins, somebody doesn't. And now it's separate. Those things can be magnified. It can be extremely difficult.
Another thing you mentioned about teenagers, how as they get older, as children get older, and if you bring them so deep into the process, they could try to get exactly what they want.
Yeah, and that's going to happen anyway. Everybody's heard that term, Disney World dad. And I think that's normal. I know people get upset, but parents are just trying to make it better in a way, maybe trying to make up for their guilt. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of things, and people are just doing the majority of the time the best they can with what they have, and within them, like what their abilities are, which is essentially kind of what they learned as a kid. But it can get to a situation when as you have an adolescent, young adult, when they know too much about it, it's not good. And the reality is there's so much information out there on the internet and ways if they really wanted to, but certainly just don't spoon feed it to them. Don't let them read the stuff. Don't involve them as if they are your friend. It's not healthy. It's not. And if the court finds out and they figure that out, it is going to come back on you. Even if you had the best intentions, it's not going to look good.
This kind of goes back a little bit to another show that we did together, and you talked about the fact that there are certain things that you should not post on social media. So in addition to your future ex-spouse finding out about it, what about the kids finding out about certain things as well?
That's right. And at the end of the day, and I'm not a therapist, although I have I've learned a lot. I have a lot of experience, and it's going to come back on you. And it's, if you're talking bad about their parent, it does reflect poorly on you. But at the end of the day, your children, I mean, that's their blood. That's their genes. That's not helpful to their self-identity if you're disparaging somebody who helped create them. It's just not good. It's not.
That goes back to the mental health aspect as well. Yeah. I also noticed
if they're that bad, I will say, Julie, if they're that bad, the kids are going to figure it out when they're adults. Let them figure it out on their own. It's true.
Okay, I just had to turn off my microphone to laugh. All right, just bringing you guys into the video part of this. So I also noticed that courts require a parenting class for all divorces with children.
This is true. And just to give you some education on how ideally you should communicate. A lot of the classes, they used to be online and in person. Of course, now they're all online, and there's good information, but it's only as good as the person who is checking that box is receiving it. We should probably have parenting classes before we have children.
Yes, absolutely. I can definitely agree with that one. And you know what? I thought about this as well. So like I said earlier, this goes back to the child's mental health. Does a child always meet with a mental health professional during this time just to check things out?
No, that there is no requirement in the statute. There is no requirement through the cases. It's a very good idea. And it is something that I encourage my clients to do. And at the end of the day, the parents have to take them. There can be a lot of control issues sometimes with one parent not liking a therapist or what the therapist has to say. But aside from that, I think it's of the utmost importance just to allow your child a place to express how they're feeling about their situation.
Help them talk it out. Get those feelings out.
in a way that's not judgmental. And they really do. They don't want to hurt either parent. They don't want to say anything. So this can give them a space just to maybe discuss their feelings in a way that they don't feel like maybe they're hurting the other parent.
And, now we live in a society, we live in a world where we talk more about mental health issues. So it's becoming more normal. It's not there yet, but it is becoming that way.
Agreed. It needs to, particularly in our adolescence, as I've had children in that age, and even in the last 5 years, it's serious. These teenagers in a intact home, with a lot of support, struggle. They struggle a lot, and it should. It's Julia, you've got me thinking I need to go propose a bill or something for the legislature to really enact this, and we actually are in a mental health crisis at this moment. It's very difficult to get an appointment with therapists for your children. So I encourage them, get the children in. These therapists are booked. These psychologists, psychiatrists, they're busy right now, as busy as divorce attorneys.
Wow. Welcome back to Women Winning Divorce with Heather Quick, owner and attorney for Florida Women's Law Group. So, Heather, we talked about child custody, also known as time sharing, right? Let's talk about parenting plans. Define a parenting plan again for me.
A parenting plan is a document that really details how certain responsibilities are going to be handled with the children. There's a lot of very typical language that deals with communication. And then it talks about the schedule, and is very detailed, and not just your weekly, daily schedule, your holiday schedule, the birthdays, the Mother's Day, the Father's Day, the parents' birthdays. And you can craft this. It'll talk about summer vacation, extracurricular activities. It details so much. And there's even, there's so many things you can put in there, because you're going to want to, you can't always anticipate everything, but it's a comprehensive 20 to 30 page document.
Okay, so let's talk about this. I didn't even think about all of that. You named holidays, you named birthdays for everyone, really, and summer vacations, all of the above. How long does this process take? Because I'm thinking, you said 20 to 30 page document. This has to be an extended process to come up with this.
Yes. And so it's something that, when you're going through the divorce, we discuss with our clients to begin thinking about it and looking at it, because of course there's a standard one. So then you can start with that. There's the standard one for Duval County, St. Johns County. Hey, this is our guidelines. You can build on it and change it, because it is built, the standard time sharing and parenting plan is built around the traditional school schedule. It is all, and that's essentially the way it is. So and it's really important, because it is very much just your basic school schedule. But if you are Jewish, not Christian, it's not going to account for those holidays. So you're going to have to really, those are things we talk about. If, you are Muslim and celebrate other holidays, and I know Ramadan is very different. And I had a client that was really, you have to go through, when is that going to occur? But that's why it is so important, because we're not all the same. Clearly, we don't all have the same traditions. And therefore, it's important to think about that. Many, and even if it's a Christmas Eve, you have a tradition generally for your Christmas Eve versus your Christmas Day. You want to think about that in your parenting plan. Some people have a big, Thanksgiving, not so much. We're going to alternate everything. Think about whole families do family vacations the second week in July all the time. Well, you better put that in there, because otherwise that's not going to be your time. And it can get so contentious for many people on the holidays and the time. And, it's a process.
Yeah, you said contentious. I was thinking this is a sticky situation.
Yes.
Okay, what if they have different religious beliefs? That creates an even bigger situation or stickier situation.
Girl, that is an understatement of the century. Let me just tell you that it is, and it really is. And it's difficult because then Constitution, separation of church and state, and you bring religious issues to the court. Oh, I mean, that is difficult because as two people who came together, and came together with that, you sometimes courts say, you guys got to figure this out. Like, I am not going to make them do one or the other. But at the end of the day, I've got to divide. I've got to figure out who's going to spend what time, and you can do your religion during your time and the other can do theirs. So yes, there are ways to get there, compromising. And that's when I was talking about the parenting plan, thinking about what you want, what the other, where we can compromise is truly best, because at the end of the day, if we're in front of a court to make these decisions, that judge does not know either one of you. It's only going to have a short amount of time to figure that out, and they're going to make the best decision that they can based on the evidence they hear, but they're going to fall back on a lot of boilerplate, typical things.
Okay, I have even more questions. But another thing I thought about is primary custody. Okay, so this is kind of going back to what we talked about in the first segment. What does that mean to have primary custody? Because does that go back to there's no such thing as equal time?
Yeah, so now the word is really majority. Who has the majority of the time? Somebody's address needs to be designated for school. Like, let's just be, if we're talking, if obviously we're dealing with the children, minor children, so they're under 18. Someone's address absolutely has to be designated for school. That usually would be what you're thinking of. And that doesn't take anything away from either parent. We can go into that in detail, but at the end of the day, that's going to have more to do with just logistics. They got to live somewhere. Kids need to know where they live, And now they're so adjusted. They have two homes, and the children adapt. As hard as it is on the parents and as difficult as the process is, they usually get there with two loving, reasonable parents.
Okay. And I was thinking that the majority custody, that it has something to do with how everything is going to eventually be laid out with the parenting plan as far as who gets them for holidays and that type of thing. But that doesn't have anything to do with it.
That is correct. The holidays, even if, let's just say, let's say if the mother has them the majority of the time and the dad just really has mostly weekends, he's still going to get half the holidays. He's still going to get half the summer if he wants them, or reverse. So yes, the majority it's a formula. At the end of the day, Julie, it comes down to money. And if you have them more than 40% of the time, you're going to pay less child support. And so it's a 60-40 thing. And so we can talk all in, I want to be with my kids, whatever. I'm cynical. And so you know how I am. I've seen a lot of it. It's about the money. And so very often that's the point of the time.
Okay. I know you just saw me make some crazy faces when you said the child support thing, but I know this is going to come up in a future show. So I'm going to leave that where it is. Okay.
Yes. We'll dive into that on the next show.
So another thing that I noticed is healthcare and expenses. The parenting plan just lays out everything: education decisions, college expenses, healthcare expenses, extracurriculars, how the parents will communicate. So basically, you can't call me, but you can text me, something like that. I don't know. It really lays out everything.
It can, and it does, and it lays it out in an ideal world. And if you can't agree. If you're at a crossroads, you need to go refer back to that. There are so many people that is contentious and difficult as the actual process can be. Once the divorce is final, you guys have a schedule and you move forward, you move on with your life and you follow it, but maybe you don't always have to do it because, I mean, maybe you don't always have to refer to it. Some people, it is, if it wasn't in there, that's not what they're doing. But many people can be flexible. But on the money part and on the schedule, those are important. And yes, some people need to communicate through a computer program that has an app because texting and phone calls is just, it doesn't work for them. And it can be a way that somebody can really harass another person through multiple texts and phone calls. And I know it's surprising to you by your face, Julie, but it is very, I don't know if I'll say common, but it happens.
It happens. Oh, man. Okay. So another thing I was thinking about, so what do the courts look at when they're deciding custody and or time sharing and parenting plans? There are guidelines that they follow, right?
Absolutely. It's in the statute. And so that's really what they have to follow. And, you know, when I say it's in the statute, they are going to talk about, you know, what is been the involvement? What is the ability of one parent versus the other to provide us, you know, a stable home? And what is the ability of, you know, one parent versus the other to communicate with the other? That's a hard one, you know, like how well does one parent communicate and openly flexible with the other? You know, what is the ability, of course, to support them, but also, you know, those are a lot of the main things. And of course, it looks at historically who has provided the care, but I unfortunately, and that's one of the hardest things that we do because there are so many women who are like, before we were divorced, I did everything. And now all of a sudden he wants to say in the school and talks to the teacher and do all these things. And now all of a sudden he's saying, I don't know that I want them to be in gymnastics or football or whatever. So that it's difficult. But yes, so if we look at, the court looks at, you know, are they involved in school? What is their ability to be involved? You know, what is their, and of course, the developmental stages of the children, because it varies. You know, we have people divorcing with very young children, babies like that. They have to see their parents frequently. And in shorter, they shouldn't be away from either parent for a long period of time. And of course, they look at, you know, is there any issues of violence, any issues of substance abuse, things like that.
Okay. So one thing you mentioned was the ability. So it could be possibly, just putting this out there, it could be that, let's say the father, he wants to be there, but he may not be able to because work takes him away from home 15 to 20 days out of the month.
Exactly. That is, and, you know, this is an example I've seen many years, you know, the mother has been the primary caregiver. And by that, I mean, making their lunches, getting them to school, bath time, dinner, taking care of the children in the house. Father travels half the month, let's say 2 or 3 times, like all the time, you know, and then come to the divorce and he's like, no, I want 50-50. And you're like, that's just not even possible. And the court is not going to give him half the time so that he can have a nanny watch them. That's not in their best interest. So can very much be just a, you know, intimidation thing that they plead in there because it's just not feasible. They don't have the capacity. And, you know, no, you can't go quit your job and then not support your family financially.
Yeah, that will create even more issues. Yeah. So another thing that you mentioned, you talked about maybe if possibly there's substance abuse, domestic abuse, that type of thing, drug abuse. And what happens if that's the case? Is there an extra party involved so I can see my child?
Sometimes they're supervised, absolutely. And that can go from, there are certain agencies that, the child can go visit with their parent and they're under supervision. A lot of times that is a better situation because it's more objective than if it's a family member. As you can imagine, that can get uncomfortable and maybe not in everyone's best interest. But that's one way, is through supervision. Sometimes with substance abuse, there's a lot of different devices and tools out there, for our iPhone and the apps, that like a breathalyzer. So that can be one thing. If alcohol is an issue, or drugs, the court can impose certain certain things you have to do in order to see your children. So that's certainly been done.
Again, even more questions. Yes, even more questions. Because you mentioned the fact that, it probably would not be best if it was a family member, a third party that has nothing to do with the situation. It's neutral.
Exactly. Which is better for everybody, because then things don't escalate. But that costs money. People aren't doing that for free. So again, there's a barrier to that, because you're paying an individual in a service to provide that supervision.
Duh. I didn't even think about that. Okay. All right. You're listening to Women Winning Divorce with Heather Quick, owner and attorney for Florida Women's Law Group. Heather, we were just talking about parenting plans. I mean, a lot goes into creating a parenting plan. A lot. But what if I need to change it?
Well, that's not necessarily anything that happens very easily. And so that's why it's so important to get it done right the first time, because a lot of things are going to be very difficult. And I still believe this, and this is the truth. I say this to many clients: do it right the first time, because that is the most time, either party's probably going to get. It's going to be quite the legal burden to change that. And not that we're not successful many times, because we're only going to move forward on that if you have enough. But essentially, it's a whole new trial. It's going to be sometimes even more intense and complicated than the original divorce.
One parent wants or needs to relocate. That cannot be easy.
It's not. It's a lot of factors, again, that go into determining whether the relocation will be in the best interest of the child. Because, again, it's usually in the best interest of the parent, but now they look at, you really have to prove it's best for the child to move with that parent.
Okay. Can the judge say, nope, you can't go?
Yes. And what they'll say is, you can go, but the child's going to stay here with the other parent. You look completely shocked, Julie.
Okay. Okay. Let's talk about this. You can go, but the child must stay.
Yes.
I mean, that seems to create even more division in a divisive situation.
It's yes. And as you know, we only represent women, and I'm a mother. So clearly I have a strong point of view on the mother of a child. And I do believe, like, there's nothing wrong with, people get divorced and they do get remarried. The classic example, and I know already the look on your face that I am going to see, is that the wife gets remarried, they have a child, and then they maybe say they have another child even. So now, nice new blended family. Husband's in the military and gets transferred to California. You got to go to court, and the judge could say no if they feel like it's not in the child's best interest, and will completely divide that family. You're going crazy, I can tell.
Hold on. I mean, this is a serious situation. If you think about, especially here in Jacksonville, we have military bases. So this is something that possibly is happening right now as we speak.
Very much so. And that it does. It happens a lot. And so, one of the things when we're dealing with that original parenting plan, it is important. I always ask clients, well, is your family here? Is this the place where you think you're going to stay or not? Because some people are like, well, I think I'd want to move in a few years. It's like, well, at least that's important to know, that we can, one, tell you this is what's going to have to happen. And, it is difficult, Julie, because if you think about it, think if you're divorced and your ex-husband maybe has the children half the time and is very actively involved, but you've moved on with your life with a new spouse and family, and they get relocated. What if you can't go with your new spouse? And I share this from the woman's perspective because in my experience, the man will go with his new wife or whatever. They're not as worried about it. Yes, we still have to have a new parenting plan, and how are they going to see you? Because it's not going to be an equal time sharing if you're more than 50 miles away. But they'll go. But I mean, it's just women don't, and it's they have to go through the court system because the men will go without their kids, and because they can do that and then figure that out. But most mothers aren't going to leave their child. Then they have to go through the court. And if the husband wants to fight because they don't value maybe the child's relationship with the mother more than their own, which can happen. It's difficult.
I will randomly say things, just letting everyone know this, but it just makes me think this is possibly why some women don't remarry. It's just a thought. I'm not expecting, you don't have to respond. It's okay. It's okay. Just my thought. That's possibly why some women don't remarry, because it just adds a layer of just issues.
Oh, indeed it does. It does. And they still do remarry, but I'm sure many don't. And it does. And, part of it, Julie, is we have these children, and the reality is we have them for such a short time. When you think about your lifespan, and we have such a short period of time, but so much goes on. We live in a world that people are moving. It's so mobile and lots happens, and it just can make it so difficult, and it's hard. And these are issues that are real for people. And you can have a, parent on the other side who just makes your life difficult.
And this also goes back to, it's good to have a good relationship with that other person, because it just would help things out so much.
And, and you can try, and sometimes it's just impossible. And I know we'll talk about the whole narcissist, and we'll get into that on many, many episodes. And it's not always, you can only do so much, but you can control your own behavior and your own approach and how you show up in that relationship. And unfortunately, that is not always enough.
All right. I'm just going to move on. I really am. I'm just going to move on.
I think that's a good idea. Or you're going to get too upset.
I know, right? Oh, man. Okay. All right. So during divorce proceedings and custody cases or time sharing, there are some things that you can do to be successful in a case and not be self-destructive. You kind of mentioned this in segment 1 of this show. I see this is a long list. One is, do not talk negatively about the ex in front of the kids. That's one of the things that you touched on. Help us. I mean, this is really self-explanatory. However, we may need to hear it. Why is this important?
It's important because, and you know what? Everybody, they have their relationship. People have their dynamics. But once you get to court, everybody's looking. Okay. So that's one thing. It's like, okay, now everybody is looking. And so therefore, something that may not have seemed like a big deal, that may have been the communication or the style for so long, that is going to hurt you. And everybody's got an iPhone, and it's very possible your ex may video or tape them. Your children may. And for goodness sakes, don't leave voicemails. Don't put stuff in writing. Because I like it if your ex does, because I've played those voicemails, and And that can be a beautiful thing. But so just if you're my client, I'd prefer you not do that. Let's get him leave the angry voicemail.
Also, be actively involved in parenting. Actively involved, because doesn't that help with your case?
It does. And by that, yeah, are you going to the school? You meet with the teachers and you help with homework. And the thing is, I think everybody, does things in a different way. And when they know they're about to go to litigation, sometimes a shift in behavior, and you may see somebody, oh, wow, like they're becoming super dad. Just continue to do what you're doing. But I mean, I, find most women, they already are, but communicate that to your attorney, like of all the things you do, because you do so much in a day. Kind of are like, oh my gosh, if I wrote all that down, I'd be exhausted. I didn't even realize. But it's important. You got to toot your own horn. You got to be very clear as to all of the things you do, like scheduling doctor's appointments, taking to doctor's appointments, following up, and, with the referrals and school and tutors and, picture day and volunteering in the classroom and, who brought treats and all these things. Like there is so much, it's practically impossible to have a full-time job outside of that. And most women do both.
So that's a time that you should not be modest.
Indeed.
Be cooperative in willing to co-parent with your ex. We hear about co-parenting so much from the stars that say that they do this so perfectly, but there has to be some willingness to do it.
Yes. And that's when, go back to therapy. If you hate them, you're gonna have to deal with it, because I'm telling you, you got children and you got to figure out a way to deal with it. I mean, they can be awful and they cheated on you and they were the worst husband ever. But if they're showing up to parent, I mean, the court's going to let them parent, and you're going to have to get the therapy you need to set those boundaries and move on and move through that, because your children are a part of that. It's not that you ever get over it. You just go through it, but you're going to have to find another outlet to heal from that. And it will only benefit you. Nobody benefits from walking around with that hate and that anger in them towards anybody. And I'm not saying that's easy, but I'm saying it is for yourself. And of course, then that will benefit your children. It doesn't do well, for you. The kids see it, and in your children, you can end up alienating them if it's that severe, because they're going to be tired of hearing it. And they're like, that, my dad's part of me. Like, now that must mean you hate me, or I'm just like him. I do this. I don't want to be here. And that can happen. It really can.
So when we talked about therapy and mental health in the first two segments of this show, really that's for the child as well as the parents.
Yeah, this is a life-changing event. It is so important to take care of yourself and address how hurt you are, how angry, how you feel, whether you have kids or not. Like, you really don't just slide by that this is not a big deal, and it's worth the time to understand yourself, forgive your spouse, and move through that just for your future. As we talked early on, I believe that, divorce provides you an opportunity. It may, it doesn't have to be the end of your life. Like, it's an opportunity. And if you use it to learn about yourself, otherwise you're going to be in the next marriage, it's going to be the same thing. And we're going to be having the same conversation because you married the exact same person and then you showed up exact same way. So it can be better. And, I've told clients many times, you can come back and tell me I'm right. I know I'm right. So I don't really need you to come back and say, you were right. I should have done this. I don't need, I certainly do talk a lot, but it's only for the benefit of the clients. And none of it's easy. And that's why people don't just go do it. It's hard to reflect on those things and forgive. It's not, it is, but it can be worth it. And especially if there's children in your life.
Repeat customers. Making false claims about your ex to gain custody. That's a no-no.
That is a no-no. I mean, that's lying. That's lying. You are going to get caught. And you're going to look terrible as if you're alienating. There is not. And, I, as an attorney and as all attorneys, we only know what our clients tell us. I'm not there in your home. I don't know what's going on. But some things that, when you hear stuff, most of the time, I will tell my client, I need other pieces to put this because we don't go to court. He said, she said, and we need something to build this case. It's all about building the case. And it's all about having evidence to do so. And it doesn't have to be video cameras or somebody else saw it. There's so many different ways, but that's where it really requires trust and full disclosure to your attorney about everything. Because even when we talked about relocation and modifying, there's usually not one thing. And it's usually 10 or 15. And there are these facts and we build it up and we show that this is how you make a case. And so that's why if, that would not be somebody that will fare well. And I have many clients and they are telling the truth and they, are, and I mean, the judge is human. They may not believe you. And that's why it's important that your attorney really works to make sure it's not just you. There's other things that then when the whole picture's there, oh, okay, yeah, that does look like that's the situation.
It's called building a case. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, building a case. Yeah. Heather, I cannot believe we've already come to the end of the show. Is there anything you'd like to add about time sharing, parenting plans, anything else that I did not ask?
Oh, that would be like the next, I'm sure 5 or 6 shows, but mostly it's just understanding it's a big deal. This is a big deal. You are going to court. You are now subject to the laws of Florida. It's so important to have the advice of a lawyer who is going to help you understand what you're getting into and what you're agreeing to and what your options are. It's just so important because those years, even though, and they go quickly, those 18 years when you have children go quickly and there's a lot of life in a lifetime with them. However, when you're in it, it's difficult and these things matter.
They definitely do. Thank you for listening to Women Winning Divorce. We hope you found information to help you navigate your divorce. If you like our show, please take the time to subscribe and provide a 5-star review. If you need more information, please visit our website at womenwinningdivorce.com, where you will find previous episodes and other helpful content. Join us next week as we continue our journey of women winning divorce.
Hi, I'm Flo from Progressive. Being a baseball fanatic like me can be stressful. It's not all sports points and touchdowns. So Progressive is going to help you take your mind off your team for a moment. Instead of thinking about how they missed that goal point score, think about the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, letting you choose coverage options based on your budget, unlike your team that missed the end zone net area. Well, anyway, hope this distraction about Progressive's Name Your Price tool was helpful. It sure kept me from thinking about all those penalty balls. Yay, sports!
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.